The wind howled like a wounded animal across the Montana plains, whipping snow into Sarah's face until she couldn't tell earth from sky. Her fingers had gone numb inside her thin gloves 20 minutes ago, maybe longer. Time had lost all meaning when every breath felt like swallowing knives. She stumbled forward, one foot in front of the other, though she couldn't remember why she was walking anymore. The road had disappeared beneath a blanket of white. Her stepfather's words still echoed in her ears, cruel and final. "You're 21 now. Not my problem anymore. Your mama's been dead 2 years, and I've got a new wife coming. No room for you." He'd driven her 3 hours from town, stopped the wagon in the middle of nowhere, and told her to get out. When she'd begged him to reconsider, he'd actually laughed. "You ain't pretty enough to marry, too old to be useful, and too plain for any man to want. Figure it out yourself." The wagon had disappeared into the snow, and Sarah had been alone. That was how long ago? An hour, 2. Her dress was soaked through, her wool coat doing nothing against the bitter cold that seemed to seep into her very bones. She'd stopped shivering, which some distant part of her mind recognized as dangerous. Her foot caught on something buried beneath the snow, and she went down hard. The impact drove what little air remained from her lungs. Sarah tried to push herself up, but her arms wouldn't cooperate. They felt like they belonged to someone else. Maybe she'd just rest here. Just for a moment. The snow felt almost soft beneath her cheek, welcoming even. Her eyelids grew heavy. "Mama," she thought. "I'll see you soon." She didn't hear the horse approaching, didn't hear the man's sharp curse as he spotted the dark shape against the white ground, didn't feel the strong arms that lifted her against a broad chest. But some part of her registered warmth, blessed, beautiful warmth. "Stay with me," a deep voice rumbled above her. "Don't you dare die on me, woman." The first thing Sarah became aware of was heat. Glorious, penetrating heat that seemed to reach into her frozen core and coax her back to life. The second thing was pain, her fingers and toes burning as feeling returned to them. She whimpered without meaning to. "I know it hurts," that same deep voice said, closer now, gentle despite its roughness. "That's good. Means you're not too far gone." Sarah forced her eyes open. The world swam into focus slowly. Rough-hewn log walls, a massive stone fireplace with flames dancing behind an iron grate, thick furs piled atop her, and a man. The largest man she'd ever seen. He sat in a chair beside the bed, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. He had to be 6.5 feet tall at least, with shoulders that seemed to fill her entire field of vision. Dark hair fell past his collar, and several days' worth of beard shadowed a jaw that looked like it had been carved from granite. His eyes were in startling pale blue, like ice, but somehow warm as they studied her face. "How you feeling?" he asked. Sarah tried to speak, but her throat felt like sandpaper. He seemed to understand, reaching for a cup on the nearby table. "Just water," he said, sliding one massive hand behind her head to help her drink. Small sips. The water was cold and perfect. Sarah drank greedily until he pulled the cup away. "Easy now. Too much and you'll be sick." "Where?" Her voice came out as barely a whisper. "My homestead, about 15 miles west of Stillwater." He set the cup down, those pale eyes never leaving her face. "Found you on the road. Another hour and—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Sarah's memory came flooding back. Her stepfather's cruelty, the cold, the certainty that she was going to die. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she blinked them back furiously. She wouldn't cry. Not in front of this stranger who'd saved her life. "I'm Jacob Brennan," the man said, his voice softer now. "This is my farm. You're safe here. Sarah," her name came out stronger this time, "Sarah Miller." "Well, Sarah Miller, you gave me quite a scare." Something that might have been a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Been 4 years since I've had anyone else in this house. Wasn't sure I remembered how to tend to someone. 4 years. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Sarah looked around the cabin more carefully now. It was clean but sparse. Functional furniture, no decorations save for a faded photograph on the mantel that she couldn't quite make out. The kind of place a man lived alone. "How long have I been here?" she asked. 2 days. You've been in and out." "Mostly out." Jacob stood, and Sarah had to crane her neck back to keep looking at his face. He really was enormous. "Wasn't sure you'd pull through the first night. Your core temperature was dangerously low." 2 days. Sarah glanced down at herself and realized with a start that she was wearing a man's shirt, undoubtedly Jacob's, and nothing else beneath the furs. Her dress was nowhere to be seen. Heat flooded her cheeks. I only did what was necessary, Jacob said quickly, reading her expression. Your clothes were soaked through. Frostbite sets in fast with wet clothing. I kept my eyes closed as much as possible. The tips of his ears had gone red, Sarah noticed. This giant of a man was actually embarrassed. Thank you, she said softly, for saving my life. I can't repay you, but don't want repayment. Jacob's voice came out rougher than before. What kind of man leaves a woman to freeze to death? Sarah's throat tightened. My stepfather. He said he had no use for me anymore. Something dangerous flashed in Jacob's pale eyes. His hands curled into fists at his sides, and for a moment Sarah could see exactly how intimidating this man could be when angry. Your stepfather's a goddamn fool, he said flatly. Pardon my language. Despite everything, Sarah felt a small smile tug at her lips. I've heard worse. Jacob's expression softened slightly. I bet you have. He moved toward the fireplace, picking up a poker to stir the flames. Storm's still raging out there. Won't be safe to travel for at least a week, maybe more. You're welcome to stay as long as you need. A week. Sarah's mind raced. She had nowhere else to go, no family who wanted her, no money, no prospects. She was utterly dependent on this stranger's kindness. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, watching Jacob's careful movements as he tended the fire, she felt something else entirely, something that might have been hope. I can work, she said suddenly, to earn my keep. I can cook, clean, mend clothes. I'm good with a needle, I can. Sarah. Jacob turned back to her, and the gentleness in his eyes made her chest ache. You almost died 2 days ago. Let's worry about you getting strong again before we talk about work. But I can't just... You can, and you will. He crossed back to the bed, his movements surprisingly graceful for such a large man. Right now, you need to rest and heal. That's all I'm asking of you. Sarah wanted to argue, but exhaustion was already pulling at her. Her eyelids grew heavy again. Sleep, Jacob said softly. I'll be right here if you need anything. As Sarah drifted off, she could have sworn she felt the ghost of his hand smoothing her hair back from her forehead. Could have sworn she heard him whisper, You're safe now, I promise. Sarah woke to the smell of coffee and something savory cooking. Daylight filtered through the cabin's small windows, though the wind still howled outside. Her body ached, but the sharp pain in her fingers and toes had faded to a dull throb. She pushed herself up carefully, relieved when the room didn't spin. The furs fell away, and she clutched the oversized shirt to her chest, acutely aware of her state of undress. Jacob stood at the stove, his back to her. He'd changed clothes, wore clean work pants and a different shirt that stretched across his broad shoulders. His dark hair was still damp, like he'd recently washed. You're awake, he said without turning around. How do you feel? Better. Sarah's voice was stronger now. Hungry. Good sign. Jacob ladled something from a pot into a bowl and brought it to her. Venison stew. Nothing fancy, but it'll stick to your ribs. He handed her the bowl, careful not to spill, then turned back to grab a spoon. Sarah noticed he moved around her with deliberate care, never getting too close, always giving her space, like he was trying not to frighten her. The stew was simple but delicious. Tender meat, potatoes, carrots, all in a rich broth. Sarah ate slowly, savoring each bite. When had she last had a full meal? Days before her stepfather had abandoned her, certainly. Jacob settled into his chair again, his own bowl in hand. He ate in silence, but Sarah could feel his eyes on her occasionally, checking to make sure she was all right. How long have you lived here? She asked between bites. Built this cabin 6 years ago. Worked the land for 4. Alone. Something dark crossed his face. For the last 4 years. Yes. Sarah wanted to ask more, but something in his expression stopped her. Whatever had happened 4 years ago, it still hurt. They finished eating in comfortable silence. When Sarah set her empty bowl aside, Jacob collected it without a word. Your dress is dry now, he said, nodding toward a chair near the fireplace. I'll step outside while you dress. Need to check on the animals anyway. He grabbed a heavy coat from a peg by the door and disappeared into the storm before Sarah could respond. She dressed quickly, grateful to be in her own clothes again, despite how worn they were. The dress had been mended dozens of times, the fabric thin in places. It was all she owned in the world. When Jacob returned, stamping snow from his boots, he found her attempting to make the bed. Her movements were slow and careful. She still tired easily, but she was determined to at least do this much. You don't have to, he started. I want to, Sarah said firmly. You saved my life. The least I can do is tidy up. Jacob studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right, but if you feel weak, you sit down. Understood? Understood. Over the next few days, They fell into an easy routine. Sarah's strength returned gradually, and with it, her ability to help around the cabin. She insisted on cooking, which seemed to please Jacob immensely. The first morning she made breakfast, Sarah woke before dawn, determined to prove her worth. She moved quietly through the cabin, not wanting to wake Jacob, and set about making biscuits and gravy from the supplies she found in his larder. The smell of coffee must have roused him, because she heard his bedroom door open just as she was pulling the biscuits from the oven. "Sarah," his voice was rough with sleep. "What are you doing up?" She turned to find him standing in the doorway, his hair mussed, his shirt half-buttoned. Her mouth went dry at the sight of him, broad chest visible through the open fabric, muscled arms, the trail of dark hair that disappeared beneath his waistband. Making breakfast," she managed, forcing her eyes back to the stove. "You've been taking care of me for days. Least I can do is cook." Jacob was quiet for a moment, and she heard his footsteps approaching. He came to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth, smell the masculine scent of him, wood smoke and something uniquely. "Jacob, you didn't have to do this," he said softly. "I wanted to." Sarah plated the biscuits and gravy, her hands trembling slightly. I need to feel useful, please." His hand came up as if to touch her shoulder, then fell away. "All right, but you tell me if you get tired." They ate together as the sun rose, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold. Jacob took his first bite and actually groaned. "Lord, have mercy," he breathed. "I forgot what real food tasted like." Sarah felt her cheeks warm with pleasure. "It's just biscuits and gravy. Best biscuits I've ever had." He took another large bite, closing his eyes in appreciation. "Haven't had a decent meal since—" He trailed off, looking at that photograph on the mantel. Sarah followed his gaze. The picture showed a younger Jacob, clean-shaven and smiling, with a pretty blonde woman in a wedding dress beside him. She was beautiful, delicate features, light hair swept up in an elegant style, a confident smile. Sarah looked down at her own worn dress, her work-roughened hands. She would never be that beautiful, never be that refined. "Your wife?" she asked softly, though she already knew the answer. Jacob's jaw tightened. "Mary. She died 4 years ago. Fever took her in less than a week." "I'm so sorry." "She was carrying our first child." His voice was barely above a whisper. "Lost them both." Sarah's heart clenched. "Oh, Jacob!" He set his fork down, his large hands curling into fists on the table. "Doctor said there was nothing anyone could have done. The fever came on too fast, too strong. But I keep thinking if I'd noticed sooner, if I'd gotten her to town faster, if I'd—" "You can't torture yourself with what-ifs," Sarah said gently. "I learned that when my mother died." Jacob looked at her, really looked at her, and Sarah saw the depth of pain in his eyes. This man had loved his wife deeply, still loved her, in a way. "Tell me about your mother," he said. Sarah took a breath. She didn't talk about her mother often. It hurt too much. But something about Jacob made her want to share. "She was beautiful," Sarah began. "Kind. She loved to sing while she worked. Even when she was sick, even when every breath was agony, she'd hum little tunes." Her voice caught. "I nursed her for 6 months. Watched her waste away bit by bit. Toward the end, she didn't even recognize me. That must have been terrible." "It was. But I'm glad I was there. Glad she didn't die alone." Sarah blinked back tears. "My stepfather, though, he resented every moment I spent caring for her. Said I was neglecting my duties to the house. After she died, he got worse. Started saying I ate too much, took up too much space. Wasn't worth the trouble of keeping." Jacob's expression hardened. "You were a daughter in mourning." He didn't see it that way. He saw me as an obligation he'd inherited, one he wanted to be rid of. Sarah's hands trembled around her coffee cup. "He told me I was plain, unlovable, that no man would ever want me because I had nothing to offer." He's a goddamn fool," Jacob said flatly. "Pardon my language. I've heard worse." "I bet you have." He reached across the table, and Sarah's breath caught as his large hand covered hers. His palm was rough with calluses, but his touch was gentle. "You're none of those things he said, Sarah. You hear me? None of them." Sarah looked down at their hands, his so large it completely engulfed hers. She'd never been touched like this before, with such tenderness. It made her throat tight with emotion. "You barely know me," she whispered. I know enough. His thumb stroked across her knuckles, sending shivers up her arm. I know you're strong enough to survive being abandoned in a blizzard. I know you're kind enough to worry about earning your keep when you nearly died. I know you're brave enough to keep going when most people would have given up. Jacob, and I know you're beautiful. His voice had gone rough. Maybe not in the way society defines it, with fancy dresses and elaborate hairstyles, but in ways that matter. In the curve of your smile when you're pleased, in the fire in your eyes when you're determined, in the gentleness of your touch. Sarah's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. He squeezed her hand once more, then released it and stood. I need to tend to the animals. But Sarah, thank you for breakfast and for bringing life back to this house. He left before she could respond, disappearing into the bitter cold. Sarah sat alone at the table, her hand still tingling where he'd touched it, her heart full of emotions she couldn't quite name. That afternoon, while Jacob was outside mending a fence, Sarah took the opportunity to explore the cabin more thoroughly. She needed to know where everything was, if she was going to be helpful. She found his late wife's things tucked away in a trunk in the spare room. Fine dresses, a silver-backed hairbrush, delicate handkerchiefs embroidered with flowers. Sarah ran her fingers over the fabric of a beautiful green silk gown, imagining how lovely Mary must have looked in it. She was a seamstress before we married. Sarah jumped, turning to find Jacob standing in the doorway. She hadn't heard him come in. I'm sorry, she said quickly, closing the trunk. I wasn't snooping, I was just... It's all right. He crossed to kneel beside her, opening the trunk again. You should look. These are just things gathering dust. He pulled out the green dress, holding it up. This was her favorite. She made it herself for our first anniversary. It's beautiful, Sarah said honestly. She was talented. Jacob folded the dress carefully. Made dresses for half the women in Stillwater. I always told her she could open a shop if she wanted, but she said she liked working from home. Sarah heard the pain in his voice, the longing. You miss her every day. He met Sarah's eyes, but the missing has changed over the years. At first it was this raw, bleeding wound that I thought would kill me. Now it's gentler, sad, but bearable. Do you think you'll ever stop missing her? No, but I don't think I'm supposed to. She was part of my life, part of who I am. Forgetting her would mean forgetting 4 years of happiness. He placed the dress back in the trunk. But I also know she wouldn't want me to live in the past forever. She'd want me to move forward, to find joy again. Sarah's heart clenched. That's a very mature way of looking at it. Took me 4 years to get here. A wry smile touched his lips. 4 years of well-meaning neighbors trying to set me up, telling me it was time to move on. But you can't rush grief. It moves at its own pace. No, Sarah agreed quietly. You can't rush it. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both lost in their own memories of loss. Tell me something happy about her, Sarah said impulsively. A good memory. Jacob's expression softened. She couldn't cook to save her life. Burned everything. I used to tease her that her biscuits could be used as ammunition. He laughed, the sound surprising Sarah, but she'd laugh too, and then she'd kiss me until I forgot all about the ruined meal. Sarah found herself smiling. She sounds wonderful. She was. She was also stubborn as a mule, had a terrible temper when riled, and sang off key. He looked at Sarah. But she was perfect for me. We fit. I'm glad you had that, Sarah said sincerely, even if it was too short. Me too. He stood, offering her his hand. Come on, let me teach you how to milk the cow. She's ornery, but she gives good cream. Sarah let him pull her to her feet, and they spent the next hour in the barn, Jacob patiently showing her how to milk Bessie, while Sarah tried not to laugh at the cow's indignant moos. That night, as they sat by the fire, Sarah mending one of Jacob's shirts while he carved a piece of wood, she felt something settle in her chest. Peace, maybe, or belonging. She glanced at Jacob, watching the way the firelight played across his strong features, the way his large hands moved with surprising delicacy as he worked the wood. He looked up, catching her staring. What? Nothing, Sarah said quickly, dropping her gaze back to her sewing. Just thank you for everything. You keep thanking me, he said quietly. But Sarah, you've given me something too. What's that? Hope. He set down his carving. For the first time in 4 years, I have hope. You did that. Sarah's eyes stung. Jacob. It's true. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his gaze intense. You walked into my life. Well, I carried you into my life, and everything changed. The cabin doesn't feel empty anymore. I wake up with a reason to smile. I look forward to meals, to conversations, to just being with someone again. I feel the same. Sarah admitted. I thought I was going to die alone and unmissed, but you saved me. You made me feel like I matter. You do matter. More than you know. The air between them seemed to thicken, become charged with something neither wanted to name yet. It was too soon, too fast, but it was there, undeniable and growing stronger each day. We should get some sleep, Jacob said finally, though he didn't move. Long day tomorrow. What's tomorrow? If the weather holds, I need to ride to the neighboring homestead. Borrow some supplies. They're good people, the Johnsons. I think you'd like them. Sarah felt a flutter of nervousness. You're going to tell them about me. Can't exactly hide you forever. He smiled gently. But don't worry, they're not the judgmental type. Martha Johnson is the kindest woman you'll ever meet. Still, Sarah twisted her hands in her lap. What will you tell them? About how I came to be here? The truth that I found you in the snow and you've been recovering. He paused. Unless you want me to say something different? No, the truth is fine. She took a breath. I don't want to cause you trouble. People will talk. Let them talk. Jacob's voice was firm. I don't give a damn what gossips say. You needed help. I gave it. End of story. But it wasn't the end of the story. Sarah could feel it in her bones. This was just the beginning. The storm raged for 8 days straight. 8 days of howling wind and endless snow. 8 days trapped in the cabin together. Sarah should have felt restless, confined. Instead, she found herself dreading the moment the storm would end, because she'd come to treasure these quiet days with Jacob. He was nothing like she'd expected. Despite his size and rough appearance, he was gentle, thoughtful. He always asked before entering a room where she might be changing, always gave her the larger portion at meals until she insisted they share equally, always made sure she was warm enough, comfortable enough, safe enough. And he listened, really listened when she talked. On the 5th day of the storm, they sat together in the early evening, the wind howling outside while the fire crackled warmly. Sarah was teaching Jacob how to properly mend a torn seam. His attempts at repairing his own clothes were well-intentioned but clumsy. No, like this, she said, guiding his large hands with her smaller ones. Small, even stitches. See? His hands dwarfed hers, rough with calluses, but she could feel him trying to be gentle with the needle and thread. Never had much use for sewing, he admitted. Mary tried to teach me once. I stabbed my finger so many times she finally just took over. Sarah smiled. The trick is patience and keeping your fingers out of the way. They worked in comfortable silence for a few minutes, Sarah's hands over his, guiding the needle through the fabric. She became acutely aware of his warmth beside her, the solid presence of him, the way his breath stirred her hair. Sarah, he said softly. She looked up, and her breath caught at the intensity in his pale blue eyes. They were so close, close enough that she could see flecks of gray in the blue, could count his dark lashes. Yes? Her voice came out, barely above a whisper. He stopped. Seemed to struggle with something. Never mind, it's nothing. But it wasn't nothing. Sarah could see it in his face, feel it in the tension between them. Something was building here, something neither of them quite knew how to name. Tell me about the war, she said impulsively, needing to break the tension before she did something foolish like kiss him. Jacob pulled back slightly, his expression becoming guarded. Not much to tell. You fought 3 years. Infantry. His jaw tightened. Saw things no man should see. Did things I'm not proud of. Sarah waited, not pushing, giving him space to share if he wanted. After a long moment, he continued. I was 19 when I enlisted. Thought I was going to be a hero, save the Union, make a difference. He laughed bitterly. Found out real quick that war isn't about heroes. It's about surviving. About watching your friends die and knowing you might be next. But you did survive. Not all of me. He tapped his chest. The body survived. But the boy who enlisted, he died somewhere in Virginia. And the man who came home? Sarah asked softly. He came west, looking for peace, for a place where the ghosts couldn't follow. Jacob met her eyes. Found it here. Built this cabin with my own hands. Worked this land. Tried to make something good from all that ugliness. Did you find peace? I did, especially after I met Mary. His expression softened. She saw past the nightmares, past the things I'd done. Made me believe I could be more than a soldier, be a husband, a father, a good man. Sarah's throat tightened. You are a good man, Jacob, one of the best I've ever known. You don't know what I've done. I know what you've done for me. I know you saved my life. I know you've treated me with nothing but kindness and respect. She reached out, placing her hand over his. Whatever happened in the war, You're not that person anymore. You've built something good here. You are something good." Jacob stared at their joined hands for a long moment. When he looked up, his eyes were suspiciously bright. "How do you do that?" he asked roughly. "Do what?" "Make me feel like I'm worth something, like I deserve—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "Deserve what?" "This. You. A second chance at happiness." He turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. "I don't deserve you, Sarah Miller, but God help me, I want to." Sarah's heart thundered in her chest. "Jacob, I know it's too soon," he said quickly. "I know we barely know each other, but I need you to understand something." He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that sent heat racing through her veins. "You've become important to me, more important than is probably wise after such a short time." "You're important to me too," Sarah admitted. "So important it scares me." "Why does it scare you?" "Because I've never had anyone look at me the way you do. Like I'm worth looking at, like I'm—" She swallowed hard. "Like I'm beautiful." "You are beautiful." The words were fierce. Absolute. Don't let anyone tell you different. Not your stepfather, not the voice in your own head. You are beautiful, Sarah, inside and out. Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks before she could stop them. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever made her feel valued, cherished, seen. "Hey," Jacob said softly, reaching up to brush her tears away with his thumb. "I didn't mean to make you cry." "They're good tears," Sarah managed. I've spent so long believing I wasn't enough. Wasn't pretty enough, young enough, good enough, and then you look at me like you're the most precious thing I've ever seen," Jacob finished. "Because you are." The air between them seemed to shimmer with unspoken words, unfulfilled wishes. Sarah found herself swaying toward him, drawn like metal to a magnet. Jacob's hand moved from her cheek to cup the back of her head, his fingers tangling in her hair. "Sarah," he breathed, "I want to kiss you. Have wanted to for days, but I need to know, is that something you want?" In answer, Sarah closed the remaining distance between them, pressing her lips to his. The kiss was tentative at first, almost chaste, but then Jacob made a low sound in his throat and pulled her closer, and the kiss deepened into something that stole Sarah's breath and set her blood on fire. His lips were firm but gentle, moving against hers with a tenderness that made her heart ache. One of his hands remained tangled in her hair, while the other settled on her waist, spanning nearly her entire side. She felt small in his embrace, delicate, but also protected, cherished. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jacob rested his forehead against hers. "Sarah," he whispered. "My God, Sarah." She couldn't form words, could only focus on the feeling of being held against his broad chest, of his heart pounding beneath her palm, of the way his hands trembled slightly where they touched her. "I should apologize," he said after a moment. I shouldn't have." "Don't." Sarah pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. "Don't apologize. Not for that. It's too fast. We barely know each other. Then we'll take time. Learn each other." She cupped his face, feeling the rasp of his beard against her palm. "But Jacob, I don't regret that kiss. Not for a second." A slow smile spread across his face, transforming his features from stern to heartbreakingly handsome. "Neither do I." They spent the rest of the evening sitting close together, sometimes talking, sometimes just enjoying the comfortable silence. When it was time for bed, Jacob walked Sarah to the spare room door. "Good night," he said softly, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Sleep well." "You too." But Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay awake for hours, her fingers touching her lips, remembering the kiss, remembering the way Jacob had looked at her, like she was everything. For the first time in her life, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could be enough, could be wanted, could be loved. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Sarah woke to find Jacob already up, standing at the window with his coffee. "Storm's breaking," he said when he noticed her. "Winds died down. Should clear completely by tomorrow." Tomorrow. Reality came crashing back. The storm was ending, which meant Sarah would have to make decisions about where to go, what to do, how to survive on her own in a harsh land where a single woman had few options and fewer protections. The thought terrified her. "Hey!" Jacob crossed to her, his hands settling gently on her shoulders. "What's wrong? You look pale." "I'm fine," Sarah lied. "Sarah," his voice was firm but kind. "Talk to me." She took a shaky breath. "Once the storm clears, I'll have to leave, and I have nowhere to go. No family, no money, no prospects. Women like me, we end up in saloons or worse. I'm not foolish enough to think otherwise. Jacob's expression darkened. That's not happening. You hear me? You're not ending up in a saloon. Then what am I supposed to do? Desperation crept into her voice. I can't stay here forever, imposing on your kindness, and I can't survive alone out here. Who says you have to survive alone? Sarah looked up at him, her heart beginning to pound. What do you mean? Jacob's hands moved from her shoulders to frame her face, his touch achingly gentle. I mean stay, not as a guest, not as someone I took pity on. Stay because, he took a breath, stay because I'm falling in love with you, Sarah Miller, and I can't imagine waking up tomorrow and not seeing your face. Sarah's breath caught. Jacob, you can't, we barely... I know it's fast and probably foolish. But I'm a 34-year-old widower who thought he'd live alone for the rest of his life. Then you came along and woke something up in me, something I thought had died with Mary. I'm not her, Sarah whispered. I can never be her. I don't want you to be her. Jacob's thumbs stroked her cheekbones. I want you to be you, Sarah, the woman who's brave enough to survive a blizzard, strong enough to keep going when most would give up, kind enough to worry about earning her keep when she nearly died, beautiful enough to take my breath away. I'm not beautiful, Sarah protested weakly. You are to me. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, then her temple, then her cheek. You are to me. Sarah felt tears spilling over again. I don't know what to say. Say you'll stay. Say you'll give us a chance. His voice dropped to a rough whisper. Say you feel this too, this thing growing between us. I do feel it, Sarah admitted. So much it terrifies me. I've never felt anything like this before. Never had anyone make me feel the way you do. How do I make you feel? Safe, valued, like I matter. She looked up at him, like I could maybe, possibly, be loved. You are loved, Jacob said fiercely. I know it's too soon to say. I know I should wait, court you properly, do things right. But Sarah, I'm falling in love with you, have been since the moment I carried you into this cabin and saw you fighting to live. Sarah's heart felt like it might burst from her chest. Jacob, stay, please. I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. We'll take it slow, proper. I'll court you the way you deserve, but please, Sarah, stay. She thought about the alternative. Being alone in a hostile world with no resources and no protection. Thought about saloons and worse. Thought about never seeing Jacob again, never feeling his gentle touch, or hearing his deep voice, or watching him smile. The choice was obvious. Yes, she breathed. Yes, I'll stay. Morning came too soon. Sarah woke to brilliant sunshine streaming through the windows and the sound of Jacob outside, shoveling snow. She dressed quickly and stepped out onto the porch, hugging herself against the cold. The world was transformed. Everything sparkled beneath a blanket of fresh snow, the sky an impossible blue above. It was beautiful and terrible all at once, because it meant the storm had truly passed. It meant decisions would have to be made. Jacob paused in his shoveling when he saw her. Morning. Coffee's ready inside. Thank you. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, the cold air sharp in her lungs. The road will be passable soon. Day or two, I'll dig out enough to hitch the wagon, take you... He trailed off, his expression troubled. Where would you want to go? Nowhere. Everywhere. Anywhere you are. I don't know, Sarah admitted. Jacob drove the shovel into a snowbank and climbed the porch steps. He didn't touch her, but he stood close enough that she could feel his warmth, smell the clean scent of him mixed with fresh air and exertion. Sarah, about what I said last night. Did you mean it? She forced herself to meet his eyes. About falling in love with me? Every word. His voice was rough, certain. I know it's too fast. I know people will talk. But I meant it. People already think I'm ruined, Sarah said quietly. I've been living alone with you for over a week, unchaperoned, sharing your food, your home. Even if nothing happened, even if you've been nothing but respectful, they'll assume the worst. Jacob's jaw clenched. Then we'll leave. Go somewhere new where no one knows us. Start fresh. You'd do that. Leave your home, your land, everything you've built for you. Yes. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Sarah, this cabin is just wood and stone. It only became a home again when you were in it. Her breath caught. Jacob, I've been thinking. He took her hands in his, so large and warm. I was trying to figure out the right way to do this, the proper way. But you're right. Propriety went out the window the moment I brought you here, so I'm just going to say it plain. Sarah's heart began to race. Marry me. The words hung in the cold air between them. What? Sarah whispered, though she'd heard him perfectly. Marry me, Sarah. Jacob's grip on her hands tightened. Not because you have nowhere else to go. Not because you feel obligated. Marry me because I'm already falling in love with you, and I can't imagine my life without you in it. We barely know each other, Sarah said weakly, even as her heart screamed yes. Then we'll spend the rest of our lives getting to know each other. He pulled her closer until she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. I know this is fast. I know it's crazy. But Sarah, I'm 34 years old. I've lived through war, loss, grief. I've learned that life is too short to waste time when you find something good, someone good. I'm not good, Sarah protested. I'm plain and poor, and you're brave and kind and beautiful, Jacob interrupted firmly. You're everything I didn't know I was still looking for, everything I thought I'd lost the right to have. Your wife would want me to be happy. His voice softened. Mary was a good woman. She'd understand. She'd want me to live again, not just exist. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how to be a wife. I'm not experienced. I'm just your Sarah. Jacob released one of her hands to cup her face. That's all you need to be. My Sarah. Yours, she whispered, testing the word. Mine. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. If you'll have me. Sarah thought about her stepfather's words, that she was too plain, too old, too ordinary for any man to want. Thought about the life she'd be consigning herself to if she said no, struggling alone, vulnerable, unloved. Then she looked at Jacob, really looked at him. She saw a man who'd saved her life without hesitation, who'd cared for her with gentle hands and kind words, who looked at her like she was precious, who made her feel for the first time in her life like she was enough. Yes, she breathed. Jacob's eyes widened. Yes, yes, I'll marry you. A smile broke across Sarah's face, even as tears spilled down her cheeks. I must be crazy, but yes, 1,000 times yes. The sound Jacob made was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. He swept her into his arms, lifting her clean off her feet as he spun her around. Sarah laughed, clutching his shoulders, feeling lighter than she had in years. When he set her down, his expression turned serious. I need you to understand something, he said. I'm not an easy man. I have nightmares sometimes from the war. I can be quiet, withdrawn. This life is hard. Long winters, short summers, endless work. It's not glamorous or comfortable. I don't need glamorous, Sarah said. I just need this. You. I want to do right by you. Jacob's hands framed her face with infinite gentleness. Court you properly, even if it's a bit backward. Take you to town, introduce you to people. Let everyone know you're going to be my wife. They'll talk. Let them. His voice was fierce. Anyone who has a problem with it can answer to me. Sarah believed him. Looking at Jacob, all 6.5 feet of protective mail, she believed no one would dare say a word against her in his presence. When? She asked. When what? When do you want to get married? Jacob's expression softened. Soon as possible. Soon as the road's clear and I can take you to town. Few days, maybe. He paused. Unless you want to wait. Have a proper engagement? No. Sarah shook her head. I don't need to wait, I'm sure. You're sure? She stood on her toes, pulling his head down to hers. I'm sure. This kiss was different from the tentative one they'd shared the night before. This was a claiming, a promise, a beginning. Jacob's arms banded around her waist, lifting her against him, and Sarah wound her arms around his neck and held on. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jacob rested his forehead against hers. You're going to be my wife, he said wonderingly, and you're going to be my husband. I'll be good to you, Sarah, I swear it. I'll work hard, provide for you, protect you. I'll never let anyone hurt you again. I know. She pressed a kiss to his jaw. I trust you. I don't deserve that trust, but I'll earn it. Every day, I'll earn it. They stood there in the snow, wrapped in each other's arms, the winter sun warming their faces. Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her here, the cruelty, the cold, the certainty that she was going to die. Her stepfather had meant to destroy her. Instead, he delivered her straight into the arms of the man who would love her. Come inside, Jacob said finally. You're shivering. I'm not cold, liar. But he smiled as he said it, pressing a kiss to her temple. Come on, I'll make us some coffee and we can talk about everything. Everything, the wedding, the farm, our future. His arms tightened around her, all of it. They spent the rest of the morning making plans. Jacob wanted to buy her a new dress for the wedding, but Sarah protested. I don't need fancy things, she said. Save your money for things we actually need. You're going to be my bride, Jacob said firmly. You deserve to feel beautiful on our wedding day. I'll feel beautiful because you'll be looking at me like I am, Sarah countered. That's all I need. In the end, they compromised. Jacob would buy her a simple new dress, nothing too expensive, and Sarah would accept it gracefully. They also discussed the farm. Jacob explained his plans for spring planting, the improvements he wanted to make to the cabin, his hopes for expanding his herd. Sarah listened, fascinated, asking questions and offering thoughts. "You really care about this place," she observed. "It's mine. Built it with my own hands, cleared the land, broke my back making it productive." He looked around the cabin with obvious pride. "Always thought I'd pass it down to my children someday, teach them to work the land, to value hard work and independence." "Children," Sarah repeated softly. Jacob's gaze snapped to hers. "If you want them. I know we haven't talked about. I shouldn't assume." "I want them," Sarah said quickly. "I've always wanted children, a family." She swallowed hard. "I was afraid I'd never have the chance." "You'll have the chance." Jacob reached across the table, taking her hand. "We'll have the chance. Together." The promise in his words made Sarah's chest ache with hope. That evening, as the sun set in shades of orange and pink, Jacob called her to the porch. "Look," he said, pointing to the horizon. Sarah gasped. The sky was painted in brilliant colors, the snow reflecting the light until everything seemed to glow. It was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. "Mary and I used to watch the sunset together," Jacob said quietly. "Every evening, weather permitting. It was our time to just be together, talk about our day, make plans, dream." Sarah tensed slightly, unsure how to respond. "I want that with you too," Jacob continued. "Our own traditions. New memories." He turned to her. "But I also don't want to pretend Mary never existed. She was part of my life. She shaped who I am." "I wouldn't ask you to forget her," Sarah said softly. "I know. That's one of the things I love about you." He pulled her against his side, his arm around her shoulders. "You're secure enough to let me remember my past while still being part of my future." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the colors fade from the sky. Sarah felt a peace settle over her, a sense that she was exactly where she was meant to be. "3 more days," Jacob murmured against her hair. "3 more days and you'll be Mrs. Brennan." Mrs. Brennan. Sarah tested the name in her mind, imagining how it would sound, how it would feel to be someone's wife, to belong. "I like the sound of that," she whispered. "So do I, sweetheart." The endearment slipped out naturally, and Sarah felt her heart flutter. "So do I." Jacob's face split into the widest smile Sarah had ever seen. He lifted her clean off her feet, spinning her around as she laughed. When he set her down, his expression turned serious again. "I'm going to kiss you now," he said, his voice rough. "If that's all right." "More than all right." He lowered his head slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. Sarah did the opposite, rising on her toes to meet him halfway. The first brush of his lips against hers was gentle, reverent, like she was something precious that might break. Sarah made a soft sound of frustration and pressed closer, her hands fisting in his shirt. Jacob groaned, one arm banding around her waist to pull her flush against him, while the other hand cradled the back of her head. The kiss deepened, became something hungry and desperate and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jacob rested his forehead against hers again. "Soon as the road's clear, we're riding to Stillwater for the preacher," he said. "I'm not waiting any longer than necessary to make you my wife." "What will people say?" Sarah asked. "About you marrying a stranger so quickly?" "I don't give a damn what people say." He pressed a kiss to her forehead, her temple, her cheek. "All I care about is you. Us." Sarah buried her face against his chest, breathing in his scent, wood smoke and soap and something uniquely Jacob. "I love you. I know it's fast, but I do. I love you." She felt his sharp intake of breath, felt his arms tighten around her. "I love you too, Sarah. From the moment I saw you in that snow, something in me knew you were meant to be mine, and I was meant to be yours." They stood there in the snow, wrapped in each other's arms, the winter sun warming their faces. Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her here, the cruelty and abandonment, the cold and fear, the certainty that she was going to die alone and unwanted. Her stepfather had meant to destroy her. Instead, he'd led her straight to her destiny. 3 days later, Sarah stood in the small church in Stillwater, her hands trembling as she smoothed down the skirt of her new dress. It was a simple gown of deep blue wool, far finer than anything she'd ever owned. Jacob had insisted on buying it despite her protests, along with new boots and a warm cloak. "You're going to be my wife," he'd said firmly when she tried to refuse. "Let me do this." The journey to Stillwater had taken most of the previous day. The roads were still treacherous in places, but Jacob's sturdy horses had managed. They'd spent the night at the boarding house, separate rooms, with Jacob making it very clear to the proprietress that Sarah was his intended bride and deserving of respect. The proprietress, a sharp-eyed woman named Mrs. Henderson, had looked Sarah up and down before nodding her approval. "About time Jacob found himself someone," she'd said. "Been too long alone in that cabin. You seem like a sensible girl." Sarah wasn't sure if that was a compliment or not, but she'd taken it as one. Now, standing in the church's small anteroom, Sarah felt her nerves threatening to overwhelm her. This was really happening. In a few minutes, she would walk down that aisle and become Jacob Brennan's wife. A knock on the door made her jump. "Come in," she called, expecting Mrs. Henderson. Instead, a petite woman with kind brown eyes peeked in. She looked to be in her 40s, with silver threading through her dark hair. "Hello, dear. I'm Martha Johnson. My husband owns the neighboring homestead to Jacob's." She stepped inside, carrying a small bouquet of dried flowers. "I know it's not much, but I thought you might like these. Every bride should have flowers." Sarah's throat tightened. "Thank you. That's very kind." Martha studied her with warm eyes. "Jacob stopped by yesterday to let us know about the wedding. Tom, that's my husband, wanted to come, but he's laid up with a bad back. Sent me to represent us both." "I'm glad you're here." Sarah realized she meant it. Having another woman present made the ceremony feel less stark, more real. "Jacob's a good man," Martha said gently. "Lost his first wife young, poor thing. We worried about him these past years, living alone out there. But when he told us about you," she smiled, "he couldn't stop talking about you, dear. How brave you are, how kind, how you make him happy again." Sarah felt heat creep into her cheeks. "He talks about me like you hung the moon." Martha reached out to adjust a curl that had escaped Sarah's simple updo. "Don't be nervous, dear. I can see in your eyes that you love him. That's all that matters." "I do love him," Sarah admitted. "I know it's fast, but love doesn't follow a timetable." Martha patted her hand. "Tom and I knew each other 3 weeks before we married. That was 23 years ago. Sometimes you just know." A soft knock interrupted them. Reverend Walsh peeked in, his weathered face creasing in a smile. "Ready, Miss Miller? Jacob's liable to wear a hole in the floor if we wait much longer." Sarah took a deep breath and nodded. "I'm ready." The church was small, the pews worn smooth from years of use. As Sarah entered, she saw Jacob standing at the altar, and her breath caught. He'd cleaned up beautifully. His dark hair was neatly combed, his beard trimmed. He wore a clean white shirt and black vest, looking more handsome than any man had a right to. But it was his eyes that held her, those pale blue eyes that tracked her every step, filled with such tenderness it made her chest ache. Besides Martha, there were a few other townspeople scattered in the pews. The blacksmith and his wife, the general store owner, Mrs. Henderson. Small-town curiosity, Sarah supposed, but she didn't care. She had eyes only for Jacob. As she reached the altar, Jacob reached out to take her hand, squeezing gently. "You're beautiful," he whispered, "just for her." "So are you," she whispered back, making him smile. Reverend Walsh cleared his throat. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the joining of this man and this woman in holy matrimony. Marriage is a sacred covenant, not to be entered into lightly." Sarah barely heard the words. She was too focused on Jacob's face, on the way his thumb stroked circles on the back of her hand, on the promise in his eyes. "Jacob Brennan," Reverend Walsh said, "do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do you part?" "I do." Jacob's voice was strong, certain, with no hesitation. "And do you, Sarah Miller, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do you part?" Sarah looked into Jacob's eyes and saw her entire future there, saw children with his dark hair and her smile, saw quiet mornings and long winters, saw laughter and tears and everything in between, saw love. "I do," she said, her voice clear and strong. Reverend Walsh smiled. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Montana and by God Almighty, I now pronounce you man and wife. He looked at Jacob with twinkling eyes. Jacob, you may kiss your bride. Jacob didn't need to be told twice. He pulled Sarah into his arms, one hand cradling the back of her head while the other spanned her waist, and kissed her thoroughly. The small congregation erupted in applause and cheers, but Sarah barely heard them. She was lost in the kiss, in the feeling of being held by this man who was now her husband. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Jacob rested his forehead against hers. "Mrs. Brennan," he whispered. "My wife, my husband." Sarah whispered back, testing out the word. It felt right. Perfect. The next hour passed in a blur. Martha hugged her warmly, whispering advice about living on a homestead. The other townspeople offered congratulations and welcome. Mrs. Henderson insisted on hosting a small celebration at the boarding house, producing a cake she'd apparently made that morning. "Couldn't let the boy get married without a proper cake," she said gruffly, though her eyes were warm. Through it all, Jacob stayed close to Sarah's side, his hand never leaving hers. He looked happier than she'd ever seen him, smiling and accepting congratulations with grace. Finally, as evening approached, they made their excuses and headed to the hotel where Jacob had booked a room for their wedding night. Sarah's nerves returned in full force as they climbed the stairs. She was a virgin, completely inexperienced, and Jacob was so large. What if she disappointed him? What if she didn't know what to do? Jacob must have sensed her anxiety because he stopped outside their room, turning to face her. "Hey," he said softly, tilting her chin up with one finger. "Talk to me. What's wrong?" "I'm nervous," Sarah admitted. "About tonight." She nodded, unable to meet his eyes. Jacob sighed, then unlocked the door and guided her inside. The room was simple but clean, with a large bed covered in a colorful quilt. He led her to sit on the edge of the bed, then knelt in front of her so they were at eye level. "Sarah, look at me." She forced herself to meet his gaze. "I love you," he said simply, "and I will never, ever hurt you. Understand? We'll go as slow as you need. If you want to just sleep tonight, we'll just sleep. There's no rush. We have our whole lives." "But don't you want—" "Of course I want you." His voice went rough. "I've wanted you since the moment I found you in that snow. But I want you happy and comfortable more than I want anything else. Your needs come first, always." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "How are you real?" Jacob smiled, reaching up to cup her face. "I'm real, and I'm yours. Just like you're mine." "I want this," Sarah said, placing her hand over his. "I want you. I'm just scared I won't be good at it, that I'll disappoint you." "Sweetheart, you could never disappoint me." He pressed a kiss to her forehead, then her temple, then her cheek. "We'll figure it out together. I'll be gentle, I promise." He stood, pulling her up with him, and began unlacing the back of her dress with patient fingers. Sarah's breathing quickened as the fabric loosened, but she forced herself to stay still, to trust him. "So beautiful," Jacob murmured as he eased the dress from her shoulders, letting it pool at her feet. "My beautiful wife." Sarah stood in just her chemise and petticoats, feeling exposed and vulnerable. But when she saw the way Jacob looked at her, like she was the most precious thing in the world, her fear began to fade. "Your turn," she said, reaching for the buttons of his vest with trembling fingers. Jacob stood still, letting her undress him. His shirt came off, revealing a broad chest marked with scars, some from the war, some from hard work. Sarah traced one long scar across his ribs. "Bayonet," Jacob said quietly. "Battle of Shiloh." Sarah pressed a kiss to the scar, feeling him shudder beneath her touch. "Does it still hurt?" "Not anymore." They undressed each other slowly, learning each other's bodies with gentle touches and soft words. When they finally came together, Jacob was as gentle as he'd promised, holding her close and whispering reassurances as he showed her what it meant to be loved. Later, much later, Sarah lay wrapped in Jacob's arms, her head on his chest. His hands stroked lazily through her hair, while the other rested possessively on her hip. "Any regrets?" he asked softly. "None." Sarah pressed a kiss to his chest, right over his heart. "You, only that I didn't find you sooner." He tightened his arms around her. "But I have you now, and I'm never letting you go." "Good," Sarah murmured sleepily, "because I'm never leaving." She felt him smile against her hair. "Sleep, wife. We have the rest of our lives ahead of us." As Sarah drifted off, safe and warm in her husband's embrace, she sent up a silent prayer of thanks for snowstorms that brought blessings, for men who saved lives, for second chances and new beginnings, for love that healed and made whole. Spring came to Montana with a riot of wildflowers and new life. The snow melted gradually, revealing earth eager for planting. Sarah stood in the doorway of the cabin, her cabin now, her home, watching Jacob work in the field he was preparing for planting. 3 months. They'd been married 3 months, and every day felt like a gift. Her hand rested on the small swell of her belly, still barely visible beneath her dress, but unmistakable to her. The baby would come in late autumn. The doctor in Stillwater had confirmed during their last visit to town. Sarah thought about the moment she'd told Jacob. It had been 2 weeks ago, in this very doorway, as the sun rose. "Jacob," she'd said, her voice trembling, "I have something to tell you." He'd set down the bucket of milk he was carrying, his expression immediately concerned. "What's wrong? Are you sick?" "No, I'm with child." She'd barely gotten the words out before he'd swept her into his arms, spinning her around as tears streamed down his face. "A baby," he'd whispered against her hair. "Sarah, we're going to have a baby. Are you happy?" she'd asked, though she could see the answer in his face. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it." He'd knelt down, pressing a kiss to her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. Your papa can't wait to meet you." Since then, Jacob had been even more protective than usual. He wouldn't let her lift anything heavy, insisted she rest frequently, and had already started building a cradle in the evenings. Now he straightened from his work, catching sight of her watching him. His face broke into that smile she loved so much, the one that made her heart skip a beat every single time. He jogged toward the cabin, and Sarah laughed as he swept her into his arms, careful of her belly. "What are you doing up?" he asked, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I told you to rest this morning. I've rested enough. I wanted to see you. I've only been out here an hour. An hour too long." Sarah wound her arms around his neck. "I missed you." Jacob's expression softened. "I missed you too, sweetheart." He set her down gently, then dropped to his knees and pressed a kiss to her belly. "And you too, little one. Are you being good for your mama?" Sarah ran her fingers through his hair, her heart so full it ached. "You're going to spoil this baby rotten." "Absolutely." He looked up at her with those pale blue eyes that still took her breath away. "Just like I spoil your mama." "I'm not spoiled." "Liar." He stood, pulling her close. "I give you everything you want. That's because I don't want much. You deserve everything, Sarah." His hand came up to cup her cheek. "You gave me back my life, my future. How can I not want to give you the world?" Tears pricked Sarah's eyes. Pregnancy had made her emotional, she'd found. "You already have given me the world, this home, our baby, your love. What more could I possibly want?" "Nothing, I hope." He pressed his forehead to hers. "Because you have all of me, Sarah Brennan. Every piece." They stood there for a long moment, wrapped in each other's arms, the spring sun warming their faces. "I need to finish the planting," Jacob said reluctantly, "but I'll be in for lunch. Martha Johnson sent over some of her bread yesterday. You should have some with butter. The baby needs good food." "The baby is barely the size of an apple," Sarah protested. "Still needs good food." He kissed her once more, then headed back to the field. Sarah watched him go, a smile playing on her lips. He was already such a devoted father, and the baby wasn't even born yet. She spent the morning doing light chores, folding laundry, mending a shirt, preparing lunch. The cabin that had seemed so empty and lonely when she'd first arrived now felt warm and lived in. There were flowers on the table, curtains she'd sewn for the windows, a braided rug she'd made during the long winter evenings. This was home, really, truly home. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Sarah opened it to find Martha Johnson standing there, a basket over her arm and a warm smile on her face. "Martha, come in." "I won't stay long," Martha said, stepping inside. "Just wanted to bring you some things." She set the basket on the table. "Ginger root for the morning sickness, some of that lavender soap you liked, and Tom caught fresh trout this morning. Thought you and Jacob might enjoy them for supper." "You're too kind," Sarah said, genuinely touched. The Johnsons had become dear friends over the past months, checking in regularly and helping where they could. "Nonsense. We take care of our own out here." Martha's eyes twinkled. "And you're one of us now. How are you feeling? Any sickness?" "Some in the mornings, but it's getting better." "Good. That should pass soon." Martha glanced around the cabin approvingly. "You've made this place a home again. Jacob's a different man than he was 6 months ago. Happy. That's because of you." "He's made me happy too," Sarah said softly. "I can see that." Martha patted her hand. "You have a glow about you. That's not just the baby. That's love. Real love. After Martha left, Sarah started preparing the trout for supper. She was peeling potatoes when Jacob came in for lunch, his shirt damp with sweat despite the cool spring air. "I'm going to wash up," he said, heading for the basin. "Smells good in here. Just bread and butter for now. But we're having trout for supper. Martha brought it by." That was kind of her. Jacob dried his hands and came to stand behind Sarah, his arms wrapping around her waist. "How are you feeling? Any sickness?" "I'm fine. Stop worrying. Can't help it." He pressed a kiss to her neck, making her shiver. "You and this baby are the most precious things in my life." Sarah leaned back against his chest. "I love you. I love you more." They ate lunch together, talking about the farm and Jacob's plans for expansion. He wanted to add another room to the cabin before the baby came, a proper nursery. "We could use the spare room," Sarah suggested. "That's your sewing room now," Jacob said. "No. I'll build an addition, something nice and big with good windows for light." "Jacob, that's a lot of work. I have time. Baby's not due until autumn." He reached across the table to take her hand. "I want our child to have a good home. The best I can provide. Our child already has the best home because you're their father." Jacob's eyes grew suspiciously bright. "You always know just what to say." That afternoon, while Jacob returned to the fields, Sarah worked on the baby's layette. She was sewing tiny gowns from soft cotton, embroidering little flowers along the hems. Martha had promised to teach her how to knit booties. As she sewed, Sarah let her mind wander to the future. Would they have a son, with Jacob's dark hair and strong build, or a daughter with her mother's eyes? Either way, this child would be loved beyond measure. She thought about her own mother, wishing desperately that she could have met Jacob, would have loved him, would have been thrilled about becoming a grandmother, and she thought about her stepfather with less bitterness than before. Yes, he'd been cruel. Yes, he'd abandoned her to die, but in doing so, he'd led her straight to Jacob, to this life, to happiness she'd never imagined possible. In a strange way, she owed him. "Thank you," she whispered to the empty room, "for being cruel enough to set me free." That evening, after a supper of perfectly cooked trout and fresh bread, Sarah and Jacob sat on the porch watching the sunset. Jacob had pulled her onto his lap, his hand resting protectively on her belly. "I've been thinking," he said quietly. "About names for the baby." Sarah smiled. "We don't even know if it's a boy or girl yet." "I know, but I still think about it." He was quiet for a moment. "If it's a girl, I'd like to name her Mary, after my first wife, if that doesn't bother you." Sarah turned to look at him, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes. "It doesn't bother me. I think it's beautiful. She was part of your life, part of who you are. Of course we should honor her. And if it's a boy, what about Thomas, after your friend from the war? You've mentioned him before." Jacob's breath caught. "Tom died saving my life, took a bullet meant for me. Then we honor him too." Sarah cupped Jacob's face. "We honor the people who made you who you are, the people who led you to me. Have I told you lately that I love you? Yes. But I never get tired of hearing it. I love you, Sarah Brennan, more than words can express. I love you too." They sat together as the sky blazed with color, orange and pink and gold. Sarah thought about how far she'd come, from a girl abandoned in the snow to a woman with a home, a husband who adored her, and a baby on the way. "What are you thinking about?" Jacob asked, his hand stroking gently over her belly. "How lucky I am. We're both lucky." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "I found you when I'd given up hope of ever being happy again. You saved me just as much as I saved you." Sarah leaned into his warmth, feeling their baby move for the first time. Just a flutter, like butterfly wings, but unmistakable. "Jacob," she gasped. "Did you feel that?" "What?" His hand stilled on her belly. "The baby. I think the baby just moved." They sat very still, waiting. A moment later, another flutter. "There!" Sarah grabbed Jacob's hand, pressing it where she'd felt the movement. "Do you feel it?" Jacob's face was a study in wonder. "I do. I feel it." His voice broke. "That's our baby, Sarah, our child." Tears streamed down both their faces as they sat together in the fading light, feeling their future move beneath their hands. "Hello, little one," Jacob whispered. "We can't wait to meet you." The end.